Okay, so welcome everyone, and this is meetup number 39 for PyData Delhi, and this is gonna be day one for the meetup. So I'm just gonna start with the introductions first and a little bit. So obviously, yeah. So what is PyData and what is NumFOCUS? So basically, NumFOCUS is an open source organization, non-profit organization which supports all these open data source tools that we use in our day-to-day life, like pandas, numpy, scikit-learn, matplotlib, and whatnot. So basically, NumFOCUS supports all these tools and provide money, developers, contributions, and everything which is necessary to sustain sustainability of the projects. And PyData is basically educational initiative by NumFOCUS to it's basically a community of developers which use these tools. And there are like 160 plus chapters of PyData all over the world, and PyData Delhi is currently like fourth or fifth largest in the world, and most active chapter in Asia. And yeah, that's pretty much about PyData Delhi and NumFOCUS. So yeah, there's one more thing. Like, I mean, all of us have been living in a pandemic state, and NumFOCUS is a non-profit, so they obviously need money to help sustain the projects and everything. PyData conferences are like one of the most concrete source of financial dependence for the all these open source projects. But as we can see that the conferences are not happening anytime soon, so I would highly appreciate if any one of you wants to donate for the NumFOCUS, because that money goes directly over to support all these projects and everything. There are two links on the screen. You guys can see. You can just go to NumFOCUS, or you can go to GitHub to donate. And it doesn't matter like how big the amount, how small and how big the amount is. Every penny counts. So yeah. So yeah, the meetup is obviously live on YouTube, and you can just head over to this link to watch the live stream and everything. And I'm hoping like all of you have been on this link. So a little bit about the speaker today. So Vincent is gonna be delivering a workshop on chatbots from the command line. A little bit about Vincent, that he is former chair of PyData Amsterdam, and he currently works as a research advocate at Rasa. Uh, I'm so more of that in a few minutes, because I think Vincent would be able to introduce himself much better than me. And yeah, so yeah, obviously where to ask questions. So this is gonna be a workshop. So I mean, sit tight, relax, because it's gonna be a long ride, and the workshop is gonna be something around 1 to 1.5 hours. And at the end of the workshop, you guys will definitely have something, a project which you can take home, and you can say proudly that yeah, I have coded this, all of this in like a real time, and I have a working project with me. And I'm assuming like every one of you would have questions to ask. So the best way to ask question is in YouTube chat. There are a couple of volunteers we have on the live stream. They would be taking your questions on rolling basis, and we would be asking the questions after the workshop. Or if the question is something like which needs attention right away, we may stop the speaker and ask it in between. So yeah, feel free to ask any questions, and just try to keep the questions relevant to the content of the workshop. Yeah, so every meetup and conference has a code of conduct associated with it, and usually the meetups and the conferences are offline, like we meet in physical, and physical being, and uh, have this code of conduct that we have to follow. But it is very imperative that we should follow this code of conduct in the virtual meetup also. So the main thing is that you have to be nice, don't be mean, and don't be rude, and ask relevant questions. But you are interested in reading the full code of conduct, it's over there at the link you can see at the bottom of the screens. Yeah, exactly. So we are always looking for proposals for lightning talks and everything. So recently we tweeted on our Twitter account and other social media channels that we are looking for proposals for this virtual meetup, and we also got like a few of them, and we are currently reviewing them. So if you have any proposals, like you want to deliver a lightning talk or something, you can just head over to this link and create an issue over there, and we will take it up from there. And a little bit about Lightning Talk. Lightning Talk is like a quick mini presentation for 5 to 10 minutes where you can explain a feature, showcase a project, or anything that you think would be good for the audience in a very small amount of time. So yeah, where to find us? Like we are everywhere on the internet. I mean, majorly of all the social medias, and you can go over to Meetup, LinkedIn, and Instagram, and everywhere. And so we are everywhere on the internet by this handle PyData Delhi. So just check it out. Just check us out, and please give a follow. That would be good for us. So yeah, so there's one more thing that we have incorporated recently, that there's a public calendar of PyData Delhi. You can just head over to this link, and so it's a Google Calendar, and it would be integrated in your calendar. So you won't be missing out any meetups or any community calls or any discussions or any quizzes. So yeah, just go over there and subscribe to our community calendar. Yeah. So we are quite active on Telegram. I mean, all the updates are over here before anywhere. So just go over to this link and join our Telegram channel. You can ask us questions if you have any doubts, anything, and we are more than happy to help you out. So yeah, let's get started on the workshop. And over to you, Vincent. I think you're mute, Vincent. We can't hear you.
I'm back, right?
Yeah. I
Okay,
can
good.
hear.
It'd be awkward to do this workshop muted. I think not a lot of people would like that. But yeah, Sanket, again, thanks for the kind introduction. I'm hoping that people can see this screen now, and that people can also see these doodles as I'm drawing. That this is something that people can sort of see. That's nice.
Yeah.
And also just to check, because I believe there's a co-pilot who will be coding along and asking questions as well, right?
Yeah. So I think Raman is on the line. Raman, can you give us a? Yeah.
Okay, no, just wanted to double check that. So then we have Raman as well. Okay, now that's enough to get started. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to show you how to install Rasa really quickly, because installing Rasa can take a while. And then while Rasa is installing, I'll do a couple of slides and give you a quick demo of some stuff so that we don't have to wait so much.
So hate to interrupt you, Vincent. Can you
Yep.
please do a quick introduction of yourself?
Oh, sorry, I completely forgot about that. You're right to point it out. So, hi everyone. My name is Vincent. I am indeed a co-chair. I used to be a co-chair of PyData Amsterdam. That's something I helped set up. And I am, a conference guy in Europe. I tend to talk at lots of conferences, usually about open data and artificial stupidity and that sort of thing. And recently, I got hired by Rasa, which is a really cool open source company. And what we are trying to do is make the chatbot technology available to everyone. And my job there is to help. I support the research team, so that means I sometimes make some tools for them, but also I do some developer advocacy to make sure that people understand the tools that we're making and that the machine learning around that is just a little bit less mysterious. So that's stuff that I typically do, and the stuff that I'm doing right now is part of that. That said, like today, what I want to do is I want to actually build a chatbot. So in the first part of this workshop, we're going to build something that works locally. And then at the end of the workshop, we're going to maybe make a PR and make a existing chatbot just better. But what I have to do first is I'm going to make a folder for my demo project. I will just call that Rasa workshop demo. That's the directory name that I'll just make for this. And then I'll just go into that folder as well. So Rasa workshop demo. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take my Python 3.7 version that I've got locally, and then I'm going to create a new virtual environment for it. And that's a relatively new Python feature. It's kind of sweet. So you can just type -m. This will grab the venv module, and then I can tell it that I'm interested in making a new vn folder. This will set up a virtual environment folder. This will just take a while. And what I can do now is I can source it. And from here, I can type python -m pip. You can also just type pip install Rasa. And this command is going to install a whole bunch of things. And this is actually going to take a small while. So just to make sure that to the Copilot, I didn't go too fast here.
No, that's okay.
Okay, good. Now, so then
I can understand it.
well, you're my proxy, right? So as long as I'm not going too fast. But the idea is this is going to install now. We're going to not hang around and watch this code run. Instead, I'm just going to give you a quick.
By the way, just a question. Does it work with 3.8 as well?
We don't test against it at the moment. So you can try 3.8, but it's at your own risk. Like we haven't. I think we're working towards it, but there's like 1 or 2 unit tests that might fail. So I would use Python 3.6 or 3.7. Those are the official versions that we support.
Okay.
But what I'm just going to briefly do is play around with what people like to call the state of the art. So what you can do is you can go to this website that's made by Hugging Face, confai.huggingface.co. And Hugging Face is also a company that's making open source tools in the natural language processing space. And what you can do is you can talk to this fully generative chatbot system. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that for a little bit here. So I'm just going to type hello there. And it asks me, hello, how are you? And then I can say, well, good, but I would like to order a pizza. And then it says, oh, I love pizza. And then I can ask, okay, can I order one? And the person says, yes, I like to eat pizza, which is kind of a weird response if you're asking if you can order one. Then I can say, well, please, I want a pizza Hawaii. And then it says, I'm a vegetarian. It's like, no, this, and one thing I should point out here is that these responses are actually state of the art in a way. They're actually doing a lot of clever stuff to make this work because it's coming up with this text all on its own. But this is not something that you as a company want to put in production because there might be some responses in here that you really never want to have. You might want to constrain the responses such that the chatbot can serve one purpose very well and not really generate anything that's outside of the scope. And in this case, it's a little bit silly because it's saying, I'm a vegetarian with a Hawaiian pizza, so, this is not too bad. But one thing that you definitely do not want is that this chatbot starts cursing or that this chatbot starts behaving unfriendly. And, there's been plenty of examples on Twitter of bots that actually start doing that if they're left unattended. So, So when we're talking about making a digital assistant, it's a good idea to keep this in the back of our mind. We want to have some sort of a system where we're able to constrain it just a little bit because we're afraid that artificial stupidity might happen, right? That's something we'd really, really like to prevent. So then the question is, how do you design a chatbot? What systems do you have in place? And then if we keep that in mind, it's probably a good idea to just briefly discuss something that you're probably used to. And I'm assuming for a lot of people in this channel, that'll be scikit-learn. Like that's probably a system we've used before. And let's just talk about how a chatbot system needs to do some other things than what scikit-learn typically does. So typically, people can see the screen, right? So you can see the little doodle there. So typically what you would do if you're using scikit-learn is you would have some sort of an input X that would go in. And that will go through a pipeline. You might have some pre-processing, and eventually you're going to have something of a classifier. And then you're going to predict your Y. That's something that you're going to hopefully predict accurately. And if X is text, then you're probably going to use a count vectorizer and whatnot. But this is the typical pipeline for scikit-learn. But if we're then going to start thinking, like, what is this system doing? Well, it's predicting just one thing. And what does a chatbot need to do? Well, a chatbot needs to do more than just one prediction. Because if a user goes up to, let's say, a chatbot that's made by Rasa, then the user is saying, for example, the text, I want pizza. And then we have to recognize that, hey, this user is interested in buying something. What is a user interested in buying? Well, this pizza. And potentially we have a chatbot that also sells other stuff like drinks. But in this case, we have an intent to buy and we have an entity that's a pizza, and then we have to give back the right action. And you can imagine that we might have something of a classifier that tells us what intent that we have, and we might have something of a classifier for this entity, and we might also have another classifier that tells us what the right action is. But these decisions are typically not just based on the current utterance, but these decisions are based on everything that's happened in the conversation so far. And that is what Rasa offers. We give you building blocks, and you can build your own for your own intent detector, and you can generate all sorts of features. But the idea is that we're not going to be doing pipelines like this, but instead we're going to be building systems that work like this. And you can imagine that there's perhaps more complexity involved with that. So what we're trying to do with Rasa is to make sure that you can definitely still tweak details if you're interested, but that you can also just go ahead and get started with this by just doing a pip install. So that also means that we're probably not going to be starting with this. Like usually when you're doing stuff with scikit-learn, there is this line you write, pandas.read CSV, right? That's usually the beginning of your analysis. But considering that we're talking about sequences and entities, we're probably not going to be able to represent a proper dialogue in a CSV file. So we're going to have to tackle it in some other way. And that's also why Rasa is a little bit different, because Rasa is a tool that you're not really going to use from the Jupyter notebook. It's mainly files in the file system that you'll be using if you're going to use Rasa. So how do you represent a conversation? We're going to see in a moment, because this is something that we're going to play with and build ourselves. But instead of having one CSV with all the conversations, what we're going to end up with is one file called the stories file. And inside that, we're going to have an intent, followed by an action, followed by another intent, followed by another action. Oh, that's my girlfriend who brought me cookies. Sorry about that. But the idea is that we have one file that says, right, so we have our intents mapped to our actions, and we can have a sequence that represents a story. And then we have another file that represents our natural language understanding data. And we're going to again see this in detail in just a bit. But the idea is that we say, hey, we have this intent for greeting someone, and we have some examples of that intent. And this is the actual training data that the bot can use to make a prediction of what your intent is. But I hope you recognize at this phase that we need a system that's like this, because we need to have something that tells us, all right, these are actions that follow each other in a sequence, and separately, here's all the examples for these different intents. So in that sense, it's a little bit more complex than just reading in a CSV file.
Vincent, I have a question.
Yep.
Is there a reason behind using the .md format rather than the traditional format?
So there's a couple of benefits about using an MD format. You can also use JSON. It's just that JSON typically is a bit harder to type, and it's easier to make a bit of an error. And for us, we figured, the data, that's kind of like a config file, if you will, for your entire system. So we'll see a couple of examples why this is nice, but we kind of came up with our own domain-specific language here. And we're just using an MD file because most developers are just familiar with it. We'll see an example later, but what we can have, for example, is that let's say I want to order a pizza. Then you can have a user that says, I want to buy, and then we can say we have the term pizza here. And if you put square brackets around it, and then a circular bracket here that says product, then as far as Rasa is concerned, pizza is now an entity of type product, and that is something that we'll also try to detect from now. So yes, it's a markdown file, but it's a bit more that we're using our own domain-specific language in the middle there. And we like to think that this gives people a lot of flexibility. Does that answer the question? Like
yeah.
Like I can't say YouTube at the moment, so then I have to assume. But I hope this answered the question. Good. So then I hope, okay, we've got these two separate data files, and again, we'll see them in just a bit. But there are some other files that are still also important to at least mention. And that's the config.yaml file and the domain.yaml file. And it is these four configuration files that are the most important ones. So it's just these four, don't worry. But the idea is that this config.yaml file, this is the config file for all of your machine learning stuff. So all the pre-processing tools and all the machine learning tools, those are things that you can configure in here. And you can definitely add your own custom Python code and link to it, that's fine. But this is also our config file for the machine learning stuff. And it's something that we'll not touch too much, but it's good to know that we can definitely add or subtract some algorithms there. The other file is a little bit more interesting, and that is called our domain.yaml file. And the idea behind the domain.yaml file is that this is the place where some things get linked. For example, we've talked about, intents, but we still have to also reply with some actions. And those actions have to be defined somewhere. And that is something that we specify in this domain.yaml file. The idea is that you can put some responses in here, but you can also put a link in here such that you can run your own custom Python code as a response. And being able to write your own Python code, that's kind of nice, because then you can customize to whatever you want. But that means that at the moment, we will be concerning ourselves with these four files. So we have our config.yaml file, we have our domain.yaml file, and our data files. The config.yaml is all the machine learning stuff. The domain.yaml file is an overview of all the intents, responses, and custom actions. We have all of our examples of intent and action sequences in our stories. And then the NLU file has examples of the entities and the intents. And these are the main files that we'll start tweaking for now.
Got it.
Are there any questions from YouTube? Just to check.
No, I think someone is having an issue installing UJSON.
What version of Python?
Someone is saying that they're getting the error, the building wheel for UJSON pip 5 and 7. Someone has already answered that, actually.
Okay, well then, then we get to be lazy and we don't have to, I guess. But if you're having install issues at this phase, one thing that I would just briefly check is that you check, hey, which Python are we using? And you should be using a Python that's inside of a virtual environment. That's usually a culprit. And another thing that you can just do is just type Python in here. And if you're using Python like lower than 3.6 or 3.8 and higher, then that might be a cause of what you're experiencing. So I would check those things first and foremost.
Someone mentioned they're using 3.7, so it should work, I think.
Yep, now 3.7 should totally work. But at this phase, I think I've spoken long enough, and that this stuff should work at this phase right now. Like we've been waiting for the pip install, and this should work. And that means that if you were to type Rasa now, and this takes a small while because Rasa has TensorFlow and all sorts of dependencies, so this unfortunately takes a small while before it actually shows us a response. But if we wait for like a few more seconds.
Yeah, it's taking time.
Yes, but then you should see something like this. Like this is a command line interface to Rasa, and there's a couple of commands at our disposal here. And this demonstrates that, yes, Rasa has indeed installed. If I were now to type ls, you should only have the virtual env folder here. But what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to run the rasa init command. And this is going to initialize a complete Rasa instance for us that we should be able to go ahead and play with. And if you're going to type rasa init, again, it's going to take a while because it has to load in all sorts of dependencies, but you're going to get this prompt. The first thing that it's going to ask you for is the document, is where am I going to install this new Rasa project? And I think the current directory is probably fine. So I'm just going to hit return there. If you have your virtual env there, it's going to say, hey, it's not empty. Are you sure? And I think I am sure. And then it's also asking me if I want to train an initial model. And I'm also going to go ahead and say yes there. Now, what we've just done is we've added a bunch of files here, and like the just enough project that will start a chatbot for us. It'll be a basic chatbot, but this will be everything that we need to get started with. And what's actually happening now is a TensorFlow model is actually being trained on your behalf. And we're just going to wait until that's done training.
On my system is asking if you want to speak to the trained assistant.
We are, like, it's going to train and then we're going to talk to it. So like first the entire thing has to train before we're able to talk to it. But you can definitely see that, hey, we're training different things and there's some intents, and this is definitely a machine learning system that's training.
Can you also clear out if there is a GPU support required for it, for the people who don't know about it?
So I'm currently not running this on a GPU. I'm just running this on a single CPU at the moment. We do support GPUs for certain heavy training schemes, but you definitely do not need it. I think I can honestly say I've worked at Rasa for 3 months and I've not used a GPU yet. It's just I've not had the need for it. And I would argue that's a good thing as well, right? It would be a bad thing if you need really, really heavy hardware in order to run a chatbot. So that's
good for the audience because not everyone might have access to GPUs.
Yeah, like, and same here. Like I think that, yeah. So I also have, to be honest, I think I've never used a proper GPU on my Mac, but detail. Anyway, at least on my machine, and depending on what machine you're using, it might take a while longer. But it's done training on my side at least, and it's asking me, hey, do you want to speak to the trained assistant on the command line? And I'm just going to say yes, because I'm interested in talking to this chatbot. And I should also tell you, this is not the most impressive chatbot. It's meant for demo purposes. But there is one thing that's useful to at least point out, and that is that Rasa is actually running a server now. So on port 5005, we're actually running something. But this is something that we can go ahead and use right now. We can talk to it. So I can type hello, and it's giving me a response. It's asking me, hey, how are you? And I can say, well, I am a bit sad. And then it's telling me that there's something that might cheer me up, and it's an image. So all I'll just go ahead and do is I'll copy that image in my browser over here just to see what comes out. It's a cute little picture of a tiger. This is what the chatbot's doing. It's trying to cheer me up. And then the chatbot is asking me, hey, did it help? And I can say, sure. And then it's telling me, great, carry on. And I can say bye. It replies bye back. And this is a very, very basic chatbot, but this is a system that's generating responses and we're sort of talking to it. So just this will be a good time to check if everyone got this working. So let's just wait for a couple of questions, I guess.
I think someone got an error when running the training part. The error says the Rasa core policies. Can someone else also read it? Please make sure the name is a valid policy. Something like that. So
one thing that's also good to check here, and let's just check. There could be some things that are happening, but what I'll just do is I'll Control C out of this chatting instance. And what I'm just going to go ahead and do is I'm going to pip freeze and then pipe that to grep. And I'm just going to, this is a way to just grab the version of Rasa that you're using. And I'm just going to check, if you're having this issue, could you just check if you're using a modern version of Python and if you are running a modern version of Rasa. Okay. One thing that could be the culprit here is some Windows users sometimes have some trouble with TensorFlow. If that's the case, it might be valid to try this in Conda. But it's hard to properly debug, but if people are really having trouble, that might be something to explore.
I think for some it is actually working. For some, for one, I think it's not working, but they haven't confirmed it yet.
Okay, well then, I'm assuming then that most people are sort of at this phase as well. Yeah. They kind of have been able to train it.
For most, it's working. I can see the chats. There's one more question by this person that can we load a custom PyTorch NLU NLP model for a language model in Rasa?
Yes, you're gonna have to put some effort in because you have to make sure the integration works well, and there's some code you have to build yourself. But in general, you can just add your own custom models. I'm currently writing some tutorials on how to do that as well. But you can definitely, anything Python will just work.
Great. I can see some more yeses and working.
Okay, well then,
it's working now.
then know that if it's not working for you, all of this stuff is recorded and you can watch it back. But I think that something that will be nice to do for the group is to just have a look at what just happened, because I talked about how Rasa in general works. We've seen that it does something from the command line, but now would be a good time to also just check, hey, what files have been created, and can we just confirm that this is how it's supposed to work? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to type the word code and dot, and what this is going to do is it's going to open up Visual Studio Code on my machine. This one. And then what I can do is I can just have a look at all the files that have been created. Just to check, this is zoomed in well enough for you?
Yeah, it is.
Good. So what I'm just going to do is I'm going to open up the files that I mentioned earlier, like the 4 files that are probably the most important to look at for now. That means that I'm going to open up this config.yaml file. I'm also going to open up the domain.yaml file. And then in this data folder, there are 2 other files. One is nlu.md, and the other one is stories.md. And I'm just going to limit myself to these 4 files, and we're just going to have a quick look.
Okay.
And let's start with this nlu.md file. And you might recognize a couple of intents that we've actually talked about, and also that we typed into the chatbot. So there's an intent that says, hey, you can greet. And there's another intent that says, hey, we can say goodbye. And what we've done here is we've basically said, hey, here's just a couple of examples of someone greeting. And this is something that then Rasa can use as an example that if someone says hi, oh, okay, that's probably a greeting. And we have a goodbye, we have affirm, we have deny, and hopefully you can recognize that, yeah, we have a couple of examples here. So we have a good mood, we have a bad mood, and these are just all sorts of examples.
Yep.
The next file is the stories.md file. And what you can see here is a couple of story paths, so to say. And the way you should read it is we see a star and then a greet. Well, greet is the intent. So that's the intent that the user gave. And for example, we saw this intent over here. And that's how that link is also made. And after we've greeted, then the bot should respond with an action. And the action in this case is to utter a greeting. And then when the mood is great, we should utter happy. And we see a couple of these paths. Now, what Rasa does, the moment that you type Rasa train, is it's going to pick up both this file as well as this file to come up with lots and lots of training examples of sequences of conversations that the bot could have had with a user. So for example, we might grab one example from the greeting thing here, and then we're going to grab one example from the mood great, and this is how the training set is essentially built up. What is then happening is that training data is passed on to the machine learning pipeline. And that machine learning pipeline, you can see that in this config.yaml file. And you can see that we do a bunch of things. We have a tokenizer and we have some featureizers. We do some count vectors. That's something from scikit-learn that you might be familiar with. But essentially everything that's happening here, this is the machine learning pipeline that we're using. And there's also these policies, which are a more advanced topic on dialogue systems. But essentially, we're not going to be touching this that much. But it's nice to know that this is where the machine learning things are configured. And we can change some hyperparameters from here if we'd like. So given that we have a system that can take a story like this and map an intent to an action, the final thing that we need is just a definition of all of these different actions. And that is something that you'll find in this domain.yaml file. We see that we have all of these different intents, and we also see that we have all of these different responses. So one thing that might be fun to do is we might just change the response, like the greeting here. So we might say something like, greetings, like 3 exclamation points kind of over the top, right? But Well, that's the thing that we can now sort of change here, and then we can see if the chatbot responds better or appropriately, at least this way. But these are the main files that we'll just briefly be playing with. And if I'm being honest, this is also where a lot of time in Rasa is essentially spent, because the data files are really important, because you want to make sure that these are accurate if you're going to be building a good chatbot system.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm now just briefly going to do is, I think here I've also got access to a terminal. Terminal right there. Zoom out just a little bit. And I'm going to make sure I'm in the same virtual environment, because that's something that I have to be sure of, right? I can't just use the base Python now. And what I'm just going to go ahead and do now is I'm going to type Rasa shell. So before we did the Rasa init, but we can also just type Rasa shell because we have a trained model.
Mm-hmm.
And this is going to start up the process. We're going to boot up the server again. Note that if you still had the old one running from your terminal, then you might get an error here saying that the port number is taken, which is not a problem on my end, but it's something to point out. But now I'm back here, and I can talk to my trusty little chatbot again. I can type hello, and then it says, "Hey, how are you?" So I think something did not change here. And I might have forgotten to save, so let's just do some live debugging. I think, well, yeah, so let's just type Rasa shell again. I might have to retrain, that might also be the problem, but let's just, I think this should work. So now I type hello. So it still says, hey, how are you? Okay, then I probably have to retrain. And actually, let's do that. I'm gonna have to retrain, I think, to make this change happen. And I just want to show you another let's fix another thing as well.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just do that. Because right now we should admit that this chatbot's not the best, and there's a couple of reasons for it. And I just want to show you one reason why the chatbot currently is not doing super well. If I were to type yo now, and yo is kind of a slang way of saying hello, what do you think the chatbot should say back?
Greetings, how are you?
Yeah, something like that, right?
Yeah.
But it's saying bye. And there's actually a reason for this, because if you look at the training data, it's never seen the word yo before. And if I then think about the settings that we have in here, the main features that we're using are these count vector featureizers. And this is a word that it's never seen before. So then, it's going to be hard to predict what's actually going to happen. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to type in yo here as well. And then what I'm just going to go ahead and do is I'm just going to type Rasa train again. So we'll just retrain a system with some extra data added to it as well. So I'll just type Rasa train here. And while
Which file should I add yo to again? NLU, right?
Sorry? I added yo to nlu.md, and you can find that in the data folder. One thing that's important is that you do add yo to the right intent. So if you're going to add yo to bye, then it's going to learn the wrong thing. But one thing that is valid to point out is we also have this models folder. And the moment that you run this training, a second file should appear here. And that's because we just retrained. And that means that we're going to be able to have a second model that we're going to pick up. That's something to point out. And now if I'm going to type Rasa shell, it should be able to detect the most recent model, because the most recent model is in the file name. And it should be picking that one up. Okay, and let's type in yo now. And now it says greetings, which is, kind of a ludicrous thing to say back, but just to show that we've indeed now updated the system, so to say. So what I'm going to do now is just make sure that everyone's on board with this and just wait for some questions. And that is going to be an excellent opportunity to
check.
have a bite of this
I don't
cookie.
see any question on the YouTube chat right now.
Okay, that's a good thing.
For me, it's still taking time to train.
What kind of machine do you have?
I have a ThinkPad T480.
Do you have how many cores are on that machine?
I have 8 cores.
Is it using all of them? Because the ThinkPad is a
Actually,
relatively modern machine.
yeah, it's a modern machine, but recently I updated it, and my GPU is not working. I also have a GPU in it, but it's for some reason not enabled, and I did not enable it last time.
Okay, but you
And
should see the bar sort of filling up though. Like it might take an extra
yeah,
while longer, but
yeah, I can see my CPU is working now. It's trained.
okay, well, that's good. So let's just have a small little look at the time. What I think might be interesting to do, and then because we want to have a small break as well at some point, right? But I think like one exercise now will be good. Because what I think would be nice to do at this point in
Mm-hmm.
time, at least, is to just have a look at this and go, you know what? Let's just add an intent. Let's just add something that this little assistant here is supposed to be doing.
I also have a question from the YouTube
Oh,
chat.
yep. Go ahead.
So Sanket Jain is asking, so the task of entire ML pipeline is to classify the intent and entity.
And all, yeah, and a few extra things as well. I don't want to go into too many details at the moment, but you are certainly correct when you say, hey, that pipeline that is going to contribute towards both the intent prediction as well as the action prediction as well as the entity. That's correct. There are some details because what we also do is we have this thing called the policy, and the idea behind that is, suppose I'm talking as a person to a pizza buying chatbot, and I say, hey, I would like to buy a pizza. The chatbot then says, okay, what kind? Then I say, Hawaii. Oh, by the way, are you a chatbot? Then a chatbot needs to recognize, yes, I'm a chatbot, so I should tell the person that. But immediately after, we have to go back to buying the pizza because of the order in which that conversation has happened. So there
Right.
are, like, we're going to have to go a little bit in depth to fully explain what's happening there. But it's not just action to intent. We actually keep track of the entire dialogue for this.
Also, there's one more question by Game Spoiler. Does it add the NLU intents into its vocabulary corpus?
No, the intents are just labels.
Okay.
So the greet, for example, that is not a token that appears in account vectorizer. Instead, it becomes a label that it will have to predict.
Mm-hmm. By the way, for me, the example is working now.
Okay, good. Now, so it does depend a little bit on the hardware, how long this runs, and sometimes it is able to calculate, a little bit more efficiently. But
Mm-hmm.
it's still deep learning, so it's still going to take a little bit of time, unfortunately. But what I think might be fun then right now is let's just say, hey, I would like you to give me a joke. Right? That can be an intent, and also something that might cheer somebody up. So what I can do now is I can add something like, hey, make me laugh, make me smile, give me a funny, tell me a joke. Any other examples that we can come up with? Give me a good gag. I guess that's also like an English slang term for a joke. A gag that's also
Yeah.
a joke,
Yeah.
I guess. Now, in real life, you would probably want to collect a little bit more of these, but I think this is good enough for now. Because what I want to demonstrate here is not so much this intent will be super accurate. Instead, what I want to show you is how do we actually add this intent? Because it's one thing to add that to this nlu.md file, but we should also update the stories file as well as this domain file. Because, we have this intent here. I think the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to add a response. Utter joke. And then I'm going to put a joke in here. And this will be like the joke that the chatbot is going to give back. And I could do something like, hey, you use Python 2. I use Python 3. That's a Python joke. I'm not suggesting it's a particularly good joke, but it's something that the chatbot could return. Let's do another one. Yeah, I guess it's a machine learning joke. I'm starting a political party. I support vector machines. I don't know. Again, I'm not suggesting that these are particularly good jokes. But because I now have two utterances here, what the chatbot will do is it'll just randomly pick one of them as a response. And this is kind of nice because this means that I can have multiple responses, and especially in the jokey theme, you can just put a lot of jokes in here, and then your chatbot is already better because of it.
Hey Vincent, I think Harshita has a question for you.
Oh, yeah?
He's in the call.
Yeah, I think there seems to be a recurring problem. There's this package, I think TensorFlow add-ons package, that seems to be giving an error, and that's like terminating the Rasa installation. So
what platform are you using?
As in, I was using Python 3.65, but like there have been errors for Python 7.59.
Oh. Are you using Windows or Ubuntu?
No, Ubuntu.
Okay.
I think I have a quick solution for that, but it's not recommended though.
Go ahead. If it works, it works.
Yeah. So remove the TensorFlow add-ons from your system pip and just add it to your virtual environment.
Oh, that can actually make a huge difference. So one bit of advice there, something that might actually help, and this happens to me all the time as well. But whenever you type pip here, there's if I'm not in the virtual environment, then it's going to go to my global environment. That's kind of sucky. A really nice way to prevent that is to type python-m pip. Because if you're going to be in a virtual environment, then it's going to grab that Python. This is sort of an insurance policy against that. It's taken me a while to learn this, and I'm definitely, this is super annoying. You have to do this because it goes wrong all the time. But this is something that might help a little bit there. Because at least this way, you're absolutely sure it's using that version of Python on that virtual environment to install it in. Might help.
I think that's how you installed it, like when you were showing us the installation as well. So that's what I use, like with the Python-m.
Okay.
Yep,
So
I used that.
Okay, then it might be something else. Try the advice that your colleague just gave, and then yeah, we're going to come back to that maybe a little bit later. Like, I want to finish this exercise, but after that, let me know. I'll gladly help you.
All right, thank you.
No worries. That was a good question. Back to this though. So let's retrace our steps. What did we do? We added this intent here, saying that we have this joke, and then we added these responses for the joke. And I guess one thing that's also good to do now is to just add that one intent to the intent list we have in our domain file. So I'll just copy joke here and put that in here. That way the domain.yaml file is just aware of that intent. And it's nice to have things link up properly. I think then if we didn't make a typo, the only extra thing that we got to do is make sure that this intent and this response is actually being used in a story. Because if it's not appearing in a story, then it's not going to generate any training data for it. So what I'm just going to go ahead and do, I think at the bottom here, we have this bot challenge. And I'm just going to add the joke intent there. And then we're going to add other joke to it as well. So I'm just going to run Rasa train. I think this is I'll double check. Joke, other joke, joke, and other joke. I think everything has been added. So what I'm just going to do now is just run this retrain thing and see if we can confirm the improvement has been made. And I guess while this is training, if anyone has another question, I might be able to answer it.
Yeah, question. This
is one follow-up to the earlier question. Kim Spallo was asking whether the NLU intents added to the vocabulary corpus. He was asking whether the examples, the words from the examples are added to the corpus. not in the labels?
So that's a good question. I'll grab the pen for that. So this intent over here, that is nothing more than just a label, but all the words here that are offered as an example, these are sort of added via count vectorizer to the corpus, if you would. It does deserve mentioning that currently this pipeline is using count vectorizers, and we're not using any pre-trained word embeddings, which is something you could also do. And if you're doing that, then the intent word technically might be in the corpus, but that's because you're using pre-trained embeddings. But this is just count vectorizer, and quite literally, we are using the exact thing in scikit-learn. Like we just copied it and started using it. But you are completely correct. One thing in particular I think that's also worth mentioning, you might notice this count vectorizer over here. And that count vectorizer has this different setting. It's set to a character. What you can also do is make character anagrams. And that's what we're doing here as well. So it's not just the token itself that gets a 1 or a 0, but it's also sequences of 1 and 2, 1 and 3, etc. of characters as well. So even if the word did not necessarily correctly appear, we might still actually have features for all those different subtokens. And that is super useful for misspellings. It's something that's a little bit counterintuitive if you've been following the latest and greatest of deep learning research. But typically every pipeline that we go to production, it just has this one because it's a nice insurance policy against spelling errors. This will depend on the language, of course, but for English, this seems to work quite well.
There is one more question.
Yep.
Jasmeet is asking, can you run a custom script instead of giving a response?
Yes, we're going to show that. I'm going to show you that later. So we're going to, before this workshop is done, and we are going to use the Pokemon chatbot for this, but we are going to see custom Python code responding to a user. And I would also argue that's also where the power of Rasa comes from, because if you can run your own Python code, then it means that you can query a database, or you can have some sort of action, you can send a text message. There's all sorts of things that you can make happen there. And that's also what makes it so powerful. It's not just sending text and images, like you can run whatever. As long as you can pip install it, you can run it.
Like in practical example, probably when you're buying a pizza and you confirm the order, then you can run a script to send the order.
Exactly. And another thing that you can do is, hey, the user is asking for a certain type of topping. Do we even have that topping? These are also like things that you might do. But yes, like whatever you can dream of, you can put it in there. So I think I've done Rasa train now, and that means that I can run Rasa shell. So let's just run that one time briefly, and then we might have a small break after that, just to catch our breath. Okay, so I'm just gonna say hello here, greetings again, but that's fine. And what I'm gonna type now is, are you a bot? Because that's also a feature that we wanna see, that's kind of nice. And now I will say, hey, give me a joke. And now it's saying, hey, I'm starting a political party. I support vector machines. Again, that's not really a good joke, but we do see that we get the response that we would have expected. And this is something that the chatbot has been able to sort of, via machine learning, bring back to us. And if I type give me joke now again, it will give me another one because we had this list of jokes that it's going to be able to give us. But this is now a feature that we ourselves added to this chatbot. Now, there is something cooler that we can look at, because I'm assuming that most of the people that are listening would probably self-identify as a data scientist and are probably wondering at this point, or data engineer. But I mean, I'm assuming that people are a little bit interested in the algorithm aspect as well. And so far, we're only just playing in markdown files. So you might have this itch that says, hey, I want to see a probability and a confidence and kind of see what's happening in there. So what you can do is you can add a setting to this Rasa shell. And I can say Rasa shell NLU, and this is just going to give me the confidence numbers as well. So as I'm typing along, we can get a bit of a glimpse of when the algorithm is getting confused, and that can be quite useful. So I'll just wait until this is set up. There we go. And I can now type yo. And you're going to get a lot more information now. So what you can see is no entities have been detected, but it is able to say, hey, this is a greeting. And I'm pretty confident about that. Now, when an algorithm says that it's 99% confident, then it doesn't necessarily mean that it is a correct assumption to be that confident, but you do have access to all of these numbers. And one thing that's kind of interesting right now is I can do something like, do you have a speedboat? And what we should now see is that it is a lot more confused in general. And again, we're cheating a little bit here because this is data the bot has never seen before, but this is nice to at least be able to confirm. Okay. Any questions on this?
This one, not directly related, but just a question related to the previous thing you were showing. Aradhya Mathur is asking, why are there 2 instances of count vectorizer in the pipeline list?
So the details are in the config. So this count vectorizer right here, that is the basic, hey, we have a word, tokenize it, and 1 or 0, and that's it. This one has a different analyzer, and you will notice that it has different settings for n-gram. So the second count vectorizer, that is handling all the character variants that we discussed earlier. And that's the difference. If I did not have these settings right here, then it would have been a rather meaningless addition. But because we have these settings, we're saying, hey, don't just take the token vectors, but also add the ones for all the different characters.
Interesting. It's very fascinating that it can get so far just in cases of simple count vectorizers.
So, so I will say it is my fundamental belief that the count vectorizer is the unsung hero of natural language processing. Like, it's a relatively simple idea, and especially if you especially if you have spelling errors, it is a nice insurance policy. It's just features that the algorithm can deal with. And I'm always a little bit suspicious if I see a pipeline that just uses deep learning. But yes, like I can understand that it's not necessarily intuitive, but after having worked at Rasa for 3 months, it's just an obvious thing. It typically makes your system a whole lot better. Okay, so I'll just quickly exit this one. I guess what I'm just gonna go ahead and do now. And is it, well, so how are people feeling? Like, are we a little bit tired? Will be like a break now? Because we've been at it for about an hour now, so this might be a good time to have a break.
Yeah, I think we can take a break for a few minutes.
Oh, sure. So like a 5-minute break or something, and then if people have questions, like we'll have like a 5-minute break, so people can get a glass of water, and then if people have like questions about their install, I'll be here to answer anything. But then everyone else that's tagging along can sort of take a small little break. And when we get back, we're going to clone a different project, and we're going to write some custom Python code as well.
Yeah, sure, definitely.
And entities. We're going to do entities.
Sounds good.
So just to check.
Rather, Vincent.
Yeah.
You got some compliments. Well, here I can't pronounce that, but they're saying it's an excellent workshop, and someone also noticed that you have a Ash hat. I'm one fan, so I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm very happy that made other people happy. And the Pokemon hat, we're going to build a Pokemon chatbot in just a bit. That's why we have this reference. And also, like in our house, if I'm wearing the hat, then my girlfriend knows that I'm working. That's also kind of why I'm wearing it.
And I see like there's one person in the YouTube chat. So he mentioned about your scikit Lego, and he also told that you forgot to mention about it in the introduction.
Well, I'm here on behalf of Rasa, obviously, which is, but yes, I maintain a couple of open source packages. That is certainly true. Scikit Lego is definitely one of the big ones. If people are interested, though, there's another open source package that I started on behalf of Rasa that might actually be interesting to just mention. The package is called What Lies. And it's a visualization tool that will explain what lies in word embeddings. And what I can do actually real quick is I can just show you the documentation, because that will make it clear what it can do. So if you go to the what lies package, like I'm still trying to figure out what exactly is in these word embeddings, because they're still a little bit magical to me. But one of the nice things about it is that I think we have the nice little language options here. What we can do with this tool is we can make plots of word embeddings that are fully interactive. So you can like zoom in and zoom out and play all sorts of styles with it. And we currently support not just the spacey embeddings, also the fast text ones and BERT embeddings. So that means that what you can do is you can say things like bank of the river, and then the word bank from that utterance is different than I'm putting money on the bank. Even though it's the same word, the BERT embeddings can then have a different meaning, and that's something that you can actually play with. And especially the scikit-learn people are going to like this. We have some light support for scikit-learn. So if you have text and you just quickly want to get that into something numeric for your scikit-learn pipeline, that is a feature that what lies can also give you. The only downside is that it's incompatible with the grid search, because scikit-learn likes to pickle things, and C++ code, as well as the stuff that Spacey is using, is not something that will pickle quickly and nicely. But definitely, if you're interested in understanding word embeddings just a bit better, leave me a message on GitHub, and like I maintain this. I'm adding features, so if that's something that people find interesting, let me know. And I guess scikit-lego is cool too. Sure, that's also valid. But I guess the main one thing that's kind of nice about scikit-lego that's definitely worth to mention. We have these amazing stickers. that I think is also a nice feature. I actually have one over here. If you make a valid contribution to the package, we mail this to you personally. It's the way the package works. That's a nice little value add there.
So I was wondering, like, is scikit-lego under NumFOCUS umbrella?
No, and that's for a bunch of reasons. So the thing is, we never really thought it was going to get popular and in production. So it's a little bit awkward right now, because we're hearing that people are actually using it in production. And there's two sort of weird things about it. One is we never went to the scikit-learn people and asked them if they were cool with us using this name this way. And the second thing is we also didn't do that with Lego. So, Lego is a corporate entity with lawyers.
Purpose of the Swedes.
Well, I mean, so it's like I think what we're doing is we're just saying, we have Lego bricks that click together in the scikit-learn ecosystem. We're not trying to pretend that we're the actual toy. We're just we're winking, but the main thing is, like, I think Lego is amazing. But the thing that we're sort of dealing with right now is, like, people are using it in production, so we have to be careful. We have to think about deprecation notices and documentation and stuff like that. So I think we should figure that stuff out before we're gonna go to NumFOCUS. And I would also argue the scikit-lego project is maintained by two people who see it as a hobby project. It's not really in need of financial support, so I wouldn't want to take any budget away from projects that do. And that's also kind of a reason.
Yeah, sounds fair. So yeah, I think we should get back to the track.
I'm gonna have one quick cookie and then we'll get back. So my girlfriend made really good cookies. Yeah, banana cookies, best.
Do we get any of those if you make a valid contribution?
I'm willing to send you one, but I don't know if the airmail is going to increase the quality of it. That's the only one. But I could send you a stroopwafel. Like, I think the stroopwafel should be able to work in the airmail.
Yeah, I mean, I've been meaning to attend PyData Amsterdam just because of the waffles.
It's becoming an internet meme at the moment. The people are coming to Amsterdam just for the waffles.
Yeah, and the ball pit too.
Oh yeah, the ball pit. Oh man, the ball pit was epic. We actually like, it started as a joke. Like, as many sponsors, it starts as a joke. Like, I go up to someone and say, "Hey, you should be the ball pit sponsor." And the next thing we know, we have this giant ball pit in the middle of the conference, which was really amazing. But anyway, chatbots. So what I think I will do now, yeah, let's discuss it. Let's discuss that way. So I think so far, like, okay, we kind of understand the system a bit, right? So we have these separate files, and that's how you can sort of configure everything. And there's a couple of things that are probably good ideas to do now. And I just want to have like a little brief moment to talk a little bit about the ethics, because I think, chatbot technology is really exciting, but you can do some, things with it that we would not be necessarily very proud of. A buddy of mine worked for a dating company, like an online dating firm, and what you don't want is chatbots pretending to be people on that platform trying to steal money, right? So there's definitely some ethical considerations that we care about here. But I think one thing that you can do that in general is a really, really good practice, and I kind of want to just talk about that, is this one intent. This one intent that says, hey, are you a chatbot or are you a human? Like this thing over here. And I think that's as far as a chatbot 101 goes, it would be a bad workshop if I didn't at least mention this. At any point in time, if a user is just curious, like, hey, are you a human being or are you a chatbot? I think ethically, every chatbot that you're designing should be able to answer this question honestly. That's kind of like a no-brainer. So on our side, also the research team is also sort of focused on this, is how can we make it easier for people to actually adhere to that standard? So, we might be able to come up with a machine learning unit test. Well, that's kind of an interesting idea that we're playing with. But in general, if you want to make it easier for people, we figured we might be able to do that a little bit more directly. So what you can do is if you go to GitHub, and I'm going to go to the Rasa GitHub, what I can do, I think it's called NLU data, if I'm not mistaken. Yep, that's the one. But if you're going to go to Rasa, you will find this one project that's called the NLU-training data project. And the idea behind this project is, how about we just collect a bunch of training data that people can go ahead and use? Because there is this chit chat, this hello saying, and there's a bunch of these features that you already probably want to have that are just a matter of, do we have the right data? So what you can do is you can go to the small talk folder, and here there's a couple of intents that are listed. So I'm going to go to the NLU file, and I'll just grab the raw file because I think that's just a little bit nicer to look at. But here you can see that we have a bunch of examples for greeting, for saying hello. There's a couple of people who genuinely say hello, buddy, to a chatbot, and it'd be a shame if the chatbot were to reply with goodbye. But also we have a couple of good intents and sort of bot challenges that are listed here. And so if you're going to be building your chatbot, definitely have a look at some of these repositories, because we think that having a good data set to start with is probably the best thing that you can do, as opposed to immediately tune the hyperparameters of the grid search. I think having a good data set to start with is probably more important. Speaking of all this though, like what we could do now is we could step by step make the chatbot a bit better, but that might take a little bit of extra time. So instead, what I'm going to recommend everyone here to do is if you go to the Rasa HQ Git repo, so that's the Git repository from Rasa, what you should be able to do, I think if you type Pokemon, you should be able to find it. Yep, I think this is the one. You can find the Pokedex demo project. Yeah, exactly. This is the right one. And what you can go ahead and do is you can just clone this. And this will be the new starting point. And the idea is here that a couple of things will just be a bit pre-configured. So there will already be entities in here, and there's already going to be a small database of Pokemon names. And we're going to clone it just like what we did before. Like we're going to have a starting point. And then we're going to have a look at all these components and how they interact, etc. But it should be said that this chatbot is a community project. So if you're interested in learning Rasa, you can definitely contribute to Rasa by adding some components to this chatbot. So I'll just wait a bit for people to find the Pokédex demo. But what I've already done locally is I've already cloned this. So I'll just give this like another minute or so to make sure that everyone has this in a virtual env with Rasa. What you can also do is throw away the current, like don't throw away the virtual env, but you can throw away the current project and replace it with this. That's also completely fine. And while people are installing and downloading that, I'm just gonna open it up in Visual Studio Code. Yep, source bin activate. All right. And people have this locally now, sort of. People are starting to download this. I see some people nodding. So what I'm just gonna do is, if you haven't downloaded this yet, that's completely fine. What I'm just gonna go ahead and do is just have a small little peek at this nlu.md file and this stories.md file. And you should notice that there's a lot of components that are just really just plainly similar. But there's a couple of other actions in here. And in particular, if you're gonna go to the bot challenge one, you're gonna notice that besides this other joke, there's now also this action check existence. And that action is actually substantially different than everything we've seen so far. But there's this confirm exists intent attached to that. So let's look at the intents first. And I alluded to this earlier, but this is something that we haven't seen before. So this is that special syntax that I talked about, that you can sort of specify that there's an entity somewhere. So one thing that we want this chatbot to be able to do, if it's going to be a Pokemon chatbot, something for the Pokemon fans, then it will be nice if some recruiter comes by and says, hey, is it a Pokemon name or not? That we can confirm if it's like an actual Pokemon name or if there's been a misspelling. Like there's something interesting about that. So I have some examples of that intent, like, hey, is Bulbasaur a Pokemon? Does Ninetales exist? But for these intents over here, it's actually quite important that we don't just detect this intent, but that also we fetch this entity as a separate thing. Because what we can then do is we can have Python take a look at that string, and if that string matches something that we have in a dictionary, then we can reply to the user, yes, that does exist. And in this simple case, I'm just saying, hey, take that from something from memory. In real life, you might match that with a database and do something like that. But I hope that we understand that, yes, this is the entity that it has to detect. And just, yeah.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but just a quick check-in. The issue that we had mentioned earlier with the incompatibility of the TF add-on, that needs to be resolved if you just upgrade your pip. So.
Oh, okay, perfect. No, that's really good to share. It's like some other people might be stuck as well. So good for sharing.
Mention it on the chat as well, the YouTube live chat, in case anyone's having issues. So thank you.
Perfect. No, perfect. So one thing I just want to briefly point out. Let's say, and this is a Pokemon that doesn't exist, but let's say, I don't know, Rasa, right? We're gonna mention that in here. In this case, like if I look at this sentence, right, Rasa is not a Pokemon name, but the way that this person is saying it, it is being used as if it is supposed to be a Pokemon name. So we're going to have some custom Python code that is going to detect, oh, that's not a Pokemon name. But then as far as the machine learning is concerned, we might still want to have this as an example, because the token Rasa needs to be an entity. And that's something that we're going to have to be able to detect. Now, there's an extra trick that we can do. We can have a lookup table here. And the idea is with this lookup table that we just have this giant file with all the different Pokemon names. And then what can happen is that we use this data file to just fill in a couple of these Pokemon names while training. And this can be something that helps our training as well. But that's a little bit of a detail. The main thing that I'm now interested in is how can we have this intent And then how can we then have this action check existence? Because this is where the custom Python code sort of comes in. And to do that, we will need to check our domain.yaml file, because again, that's where we define all of our actions as well as all of our intents. And let's have a quick look. So there's some jokes here. And we have the other cheer up stuff as well. We have an entity now that's defined inside of here as well. That's something a domain file will need. And we also have this action check existence thing. So it seems like we've declared the action somewhere, but then the question is, where is it actually running? And you might notice this actions.py file here. And that's where the logic is happening. So I'm not going to go in depth too much because it'll just take a little bit too much of my time. But the main thing that's important here is that this is a Python file called actions, and it's the standard name of the file that we typically expect from Rasa. And what we can do is we can make our own action. In this case, the name of the action is action check existence. It inherits from action, which is from the Rasa SDK package. And there's this method here called name. And the name of this action is called action check existence. And that's how the link is made. So you're going to have to make an object that has this one property attached. And if you then properly inherit it, then you will be able to have your own custom Python function inside of here that's able to run your logic. And the logic that it's doing is relatively simple. The main thing that I'm doing here is I'm grabbing the entity that is in the message. And then that entity is, if it's matching with our dictionary, then I'm saying, yes, it's a Pokemon. And in other situations, I'm saying, nope, it's not. It might be a misspelling. But this is the idea. This is how it's being linked. And this does bring me to maybe the first time that I'm talking about production and chatbots. Because if you think about it, let's say that this chatbot is going into production, then maybe this service that is giving us all of these custom actions and custom responses, maybe that's a different Docker container than the Docker container that's doing all of this machine learning stuff. Because if I think about the logs that come out of these two services, then I would definitely like these two logs to go into two different buckets. So the way that this works is we have this Rasa NLU system. That's the system that handles all the machine learning and all the natural language understanding. And then we have a separate server that we're going to call the Rasa Action server. And what Rasa NLU will do is it will recognize, there's a custom action here. I'm going to send my message to the Rasa Action service. And then I'm going to say, hey, this is the intent that I'm detecting. This is the action that you need to take. And then this Rasa Action is going to send back a message. And that's going to then go back to the happy user. But that does mean that I have to do something extra here. So I'm opening up my second window. I'm just gonna. So I have two terminals here. And this terminal over here is in a virtual environment, and so is this one. And what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to type Rasa run actions. And what this command is doing is it's looking for this actions file, and it's then going to start up this action server, locally at least. In production, you would have a different Docker container for this, but this is now something that is running this object as a service. And that's now something that a Rasa shell could communicate to. So what I'm just going to go ahead and type is I'm going to type Rasa train, because a lot of you have just only downloaded this, so you're going to have to train your first model. And once that's done, we're going to type Rasa shell, and then we should see the interaction between them. While this is training, this would be an excellent time to ask questions, because I just did a whole bunch of theory.
Let me see. There's some questions. Someone is asking if this is working in TensorFlow version 2.
So I think we're running TensorFlow 2.1 now. It does depend on what version.
That was a follow-up to the question about the TF add-on. So it's working with the like TF 2.10 and even 2.2.
Yeah, so I know the in the Slack channel, you hear someone talk about this thing that they have to implement to get 2.2 working. So I think we're nearly there for full-on 2.2 support. There might be like 1 or 2 bugs. Depending on what Rasa version you're running, though, it is really good to know that we do depend on maybe a different version of TensorFlow. So we had support for TensorFlow 1.8 back when that was a thing. But when we upgrade our Rasa version, we also tend to upgrade our TensorFlow version. So if you want to keep things compatible, it is something to be mindful of. We do have we have pretty strong dependency on TensorFlow. Like most of our, I think all of our custom models actually are built on top of it.
So I think there's a question.
Yeah.
There's a question by Villar Engineering. So the question is, what exact response is given if the bot is not confident on reply?
So this is an open problem and one that I'm actually interested in solving. Typically what people do now is they have this intent called out of scope. So you can have a label attached in that sense, where you just have a couple of examples of this has nothing to do with the chatbot, and then we're just going to detect it as an intent. And then hopefully we have enough signal to say, hey, in word embedding space, we notice that we're no longer in this cluster of word embeddings, so we're going to fall back to a fallback scenario because we have this other intent that detects out of scope. At the moment, this is the most common way that people solve this. Because in the end, it is still a machine learning system, and we still classify the most likely intent, and that's the one that's going to get picked. In Rasa, there is this feature for a fallback mechanism that you can say, hey, if the difference between the most likely intent and the second most likely intent, if that difference is not super big, then I want you to fall back and send the user a message, hey, can you rephrase that? And that's sort of the way that we typically deal with it. But in general, outlier detection for texts in a chatbot setting where there's lots of spelling errors, it's an active area of research for us.
All right, yeah, thank you.
There's just another question by Game Spoiler. He's asking, when you guys switched from 1.8 TensorFlow to 2. Whatever, did you guys switch to the eager mode as well, or are you still doing it in the same manner?
That is a really good question. I don't know exactly. So I was only hired like 3 months ago, so I wasn't around when that particular switch was made. I definitely think that most of the research team uses eager mode when they're researching, but because there are like definite benefits to not running it in eager mode but properly compiling, I'm currently assuming that we're not doing eager in production. But I should stress that's an assumption on my part. I've not checked out the code that much, like on that part of the library. So take it with a grain of salt. I am assuming at least that we're not running eager in production, but I could be wrong. Okay, so I think a lot of people have done the training now. Would I be accurate in saying that? Okay, good. So again, I might have made a typo. We're just going to see what happens now. So I'm going to type Rasa shell. I'm just going to make this a little bit smaller so I have a little bit more space here. And I'm going to grab my NLU such that I just have a nice example to play with. And one thing that I can do now is I can do hello. It says, hey, how are you? So it works. And now I can type ever heard of Rasa. And then if you noticed, we saw something happen here. So there's some logging that happened on this right-hand side of the panel. And we also see, I do not recognize Rasa. Are you sure it's spelled correctly? So then I'll now type ever heard of Ninetales. And then it says, yes, Ninetales is actually a Pokemon. Okay, so let's just confirm that indeed this response is something that we got from our custom Python code. So we see that indeed we have the string, yes, name is a Pokemon, and the string, yes, and the string, no, I do not recognize name. Are you sure it's spelled correctly? So we know for certain that what came out of here is something that came out of our custom object. But it is now nice to point out what this object is actually receiving, because we still need to pass it the entity, right? That's something that we have to detect. So that's something that the NLU system needs to be able to give to that object if we're going to get a proper response. So with that in mind, I'm just going to cancel this one, and I'm going to type Rasa shell NLU once again. And the idea of this is that I'm just going to have a bit more of a peek at the output. Okay. So what I'll just do is I'll take the same thing that I uttered above. So ever heard of Ninetales? That's just something I'm going to go ahead and use. Okay. Now notice that when I'm using Rasa shell NLU, then I'm not really having a dialogue. The only thing I'm getting back is that natural language information. So the action server didn't really respond there. But the one thing that I am seeing here is all these intents, and it's definitely saying, hey, confirm exists. That's the intent that I'm interested in. But then now we also see that this entities has been filled in. And it's able to say, hey, there's a Pokemon name, it starts there, it ends there, and this is the value of it. And then we can say the extractor here is the diet classifier. And that because in the pipeline, this is the model that is actually getting the entity out of it. So typically, at least for me, this is the point in time where I get to play a little bit with this chatbot. I'm just kind of curious, like, hey, can we make it break? Can we make it maybe behave in an interesting way? So one thing that I'm currently wondering about, I had this, yeah, let's try that. So, and I should say I've never really done this yet. So this is I'm doing this live. This is the moment where I start improvising as well. So, stuff can go wrong. That's always exciting. But now what I'm interested in is like, hey, if I ask it, ever heard of Rasa or Ninetales? Like, it's never seen an example before with two entities, right? So what's going to happen here? So at the moment, Rasa has been able to generalize, oh yeah, there's two entities being detected here. And my custom action is dispatching something for every entity that it has been able to find. Okay, so that's something to also be aware of. There's different replies that you can send. And I'm actually super happy that this worked because I didn't know if it would. We only have 4 examples after all. But I hope that you recognize here, like, yeah, we can do lots of flexible things here. Like we have our custom action, we can check databases and stuff. And this is a pretty nice starting point, if nothing else. I think what I'm also able to do is just tell it to give me a joke. Which Pokemon does Dracula like the most? Coffin. Okay, it's a good Pokemon joke. And I think another feature of this chatbot at the moment is that we have lots and lots of these jokes implemented. I think it was like 2 weeks ago, there was this guy from New Zealand who just uploaded 10 Pokemon jokes because that was his contribution to the project. It's pretty awesome. But this is also then sort of the demo. Like this is the basic idea behind Rasa. We have this nice little NLU part that will handle a lot of machine learning for you. And then you can quickly just add some behavior that you're interested in. And there's many other features as well. Like we have forms that we have in our chatbots. We can also render buttons that people can click. At the moment, we're running this from the command line, but you can have, a chatbot appear in Slack or Facebook Messenger or WhatsApp, and we have all those connectors as well. We have some deployment stuff that we could also talk about. So this is definitely just a subset of everything that Rasa does. But one thing that you now do have is an example project running on your laptop that is a chatbot that you can talk to from the command line. So that's a nice little place to be. And it also means that we can now, as a group, sort of start thinking like, hey, what features shall we add here? What will be interesting to do? But before I go there, let's just double check if there's any questions.
Nope, nothing yet.
So it's like complete silence on the YouTube channel at the moment.
No, they're talking about like the integration part, the Keras integration, ego mode, and that conversation is still happening, but
Okay.
no questions as such.
One thing that is fair to say, like in general, we do try to use Keras layers quite frequently. I mean, that is something that we really like to use. And if people are interested in the machine learning in general, I think that is something that's valid to point out to this group. So I think our research team is at, I think we're 8 people now. Like we genuinely, for a small company, have a rather big research team, and that is because it's very important for us to get these things right. The downside, of course, is though that we now have very complicated algorithms in our pipeline, and that means that it might be a good idea to figure out ways to get that a little bit more easily explained to some of our community members. So part of my job is to maintain this YouTube playlist, where every week I just talk about an algorithm in NLP, and I try to explain it in a really clear way. So if you're interested in the TensorFlow model that we're running that does both intense and entity extraction at the same time, you might want to check out these 3 videos on the diet architecture. It's a TensorFlow deep learning architecture that we think has really interesting characteristics for the chatbot use case. And also, like, you can ping me on Twitter and request content. It's my job to make this stuff. So if there's anything about Rasa that you're interested in, let me know, because I would love to make content for you in that sense. But if you're especially interested in the more deep learning aspect, check out these 3 videos. Diet really is an interesting architecture there.
So yeah, I was wondering like how big the Pokemon dataset is on this Pokédex project.
Also, it's not gigabytes, I can tell you that. So last time I gave this workshop, there was a really big, rather serious Pokemon fan out there who was like really meta and knew everything about Pokemon. I think data. So these are the Pokemon names. So 702 Pokemon. So I think that's not all of them, but most of them. One thing that's interesting to mention here, this is just the name of the Pokemon names, but I also 2 weeks ago got this contribution from the same guy from New Zealand. And he actually added the full Pokemon database from Kaggle. So like every Pokemon, how big they are, their hit points, etc. So it is my goal to eventually have a chatbot where you can say, hey, I want to know from that Pokemon, what is their hit points? And that's kind of an interesting problem, because then, you want to take natural language, translate that into SQL. I think there's something nice in general there that we want to get right. But this is also a data set that you can use to write custom actions, so to say. I'm not a Pokemon expert, as you might have noticed, despite the hat. But
no, it's great. Like, that's what Pokédex is used to be. I mean, show all the details and everything.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm gonna dream a little bit here. Like, what are some things I would like this chatbot to do? So I am not in the next 2 weeks, but fairly soon after that, I just want to put this live somewhere so people can actually talk to it. I think one of the first features that I want the chatbot to be able to do well is ask people, what features would you like me to be able to do? Because I don't know what people like from a chatbot about Pokemon. I'm not a Pokemon fan. And there's actually let me draw that, because I think there's an interesting discussion to be had there. So I have this belief, and that's represented by this Venn diagram circle. Well, let's draw a better circle. There, better circle. So I have this belief of what people want from a chatbot system. And then there is what people actually want from a chatbot system, right? And what you're hoping, in general, is that this overlap is nice and big. But that is an assumption. So if you're going to be doing this chatbot in general and like actually in production, there is this interesting balance between collecting data yourself and trying stuff out, but also to show that to other users and to actually, get data in that way. It's definitely this human in the loop, we have to label and relearn all the time type of system. We're not going to go in depth in this workshop, but one thing I do want to mention is we do have free labeling software as well. So if you're interested in trying this out in production, definitely check out this tool called Rasa X. I can highly recommend you have a look. It's something you could also run locally, but it's designed to immediately put something in production, has a nice Git link. But this is, besides your entire CI/CD convenience, also labeling software. So you can immediately get this to users and get some feedback. And that iteration is something that's actually super interesting. So that's the first feature I want to make. The second feature is simulate Pokemon battles and that sort of thing. But I would like to confirm that that's actually something that Pokemon people are interested in.
So speaking of production and data, there is a very related question. Prakar is asking if in the production level implementation, does Rasa have some kind of feedback loop? Because the entities and the intents are in a static YML configuration file.
Yeah, so I could spin it up in a moment if people are really, yeah, if people are interested, I could try to spin it up and see if I can get it up within 5 minutes. But in general, what we do is you put something out there, new data comes in, and you label. And then once in a while, you just hit retrain. So because we're dealing with deep learning systems in general, it's hard to fully update that in a streaming system. It's not how TensorFlow is designed. TensorFlow wants things in batch. But we do recommend, like, you get new data in, and then every week you put out a new version. That's definitely something that we see a lot. And there's, I mean, this is active research for us as well. But some of the stuff that we're interested in is what labels should you, what examples should you label first? So should we label the examples where the model is the most confused first? I mean, there's something to be said there. Do we want to force the labels to be labeled by at least 3 users? Yeah, that's something of interest. And then if we're going to be labeling, oh man, we might have to think about personal information. Not everyone's allowed to see that. So we might need a second machine learning algorithm to remove like personal names and addresses before we actually send it to the labelers. But all of these features that I'm talking about right now are being added to Rasa X. It's not open source, but it is free software. You can totally run it for your own chatbot. What we don't want to happen is that then maybe Amazon takes it and makes it into a service. That's the one thing we prefer not to have happen to that. But Rasa X is definitely free software as well. You can just pip install it.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. So then I'm kind of wondering, what might be a fun feature to add to this chatbot? It's something that might be interesting, something that might be fun. Now we can think of some intents. That's something we can think about. But what we can also maybe do is just come up with better examples of these intents, right? That's also something we can maybe think of. And my question to everyone currently here, this is on GitHub, right? And it's an open project. So if you see an opportunity, hey, we should maybe add yo here, right? That's a valid thing to add. Or maybe, hey, here's an intent. I'm a Pokemon person and I can tell you this is an intent that's super important. This will be an open project. So my idea for this project is that we're gonna get more and more advanced Rasa features in here. And this will be a way for people to both learn Rasa, as well as a way for us to also do a little bit of dog fooding. Because I'm personally a little bit more on the research machine learning side of things. But one thing I personally also find really interesting is just conversational design. What makes a good conversation? And what order should we ask questions to users? And how does that exactly work? And that is something we're also going to explore with this project, is the idea. Any other questions? Because there's a few things we can do now, right? I mean, I can do sort of live merging. That's something that we could do now if people are interested. But if there's any more specific questions, then I think we should handle those first.
Yeah, so I think Pranav has asked that the Pokemon doesn't contain the Generation 8 list. So
PR me, please. that'd be great. Yeah. So again, I'm not the big. So that's also what I think is interesting about this project. Very often, like us data scientists and data engineers, we are a little bit more familiar with like the engineering and the machine learning, etc., but we're not really familiar with the domain at all. That's definitely the case here. I'm not a domain expert on Pokemon whatsoever. So It's going to be interesting also to get feedback from like actual Pokemon fans in that sense.
Yeah, definitely. And there's a question by Prakhar. So the question is also, how do we handle situation of P0 when I actually have to handle entities as soon as possible? Something like a news bot.
So what P0?
Yeah,
What is P0? I might not be aware of what that means.
I think I'm also not aware of that.
I
Is
think
someone?
it's just like a scenario where you need the static list updated as soon as possible. There needs to be real-time updates. So in the news case scenario, news is coming in and then you want to be able to interact with it at the same time.
So there's two ways of handling that. I mean, the first way is to say, oh, we just have to retrain as often as possible. And it's not exactly real time, but it's something to be said for that. The other thing that you can do is you can maybe turn it into a custom action. So if the thing is, give me the most recent story, then if you just have a custom Python function that will just get the most recent story, then that's also a way of solving it. It might be the case that the most recent thing is not an entity, but just something that has to be fetched. And in those situations, a function is probably the way to solve it.
Right, fair enough.
One thing that's maybe valid to mention as well is, I mean, in this particular case, I have written the SDK or the action server, so to say, in Python. And that's convenient because I have this class at my disposal, but it's all communicating over JSON over the internet. So there are companies who are not using our Python SDK, but who are writing this in Go or Java or JSON, or like, that's also an option if that's of interest.
I think that's nice. It's quite convenient. People from Go or Rust can pick it up directly and put it up behind an API, something like that.
Yeah, I think that was actually kind of a cool one. So we have lots of meetups as well. So Rasa, if you Google it around, there's some meetups. And recently we had someone from, oh, his name is Divyang, but I forgot where he's from. He was from India, and he had a really cool demo where he was using Rasa for to do all the natural language logic for a chatbot, but the chatbot itself was living in Unity, like the 3D game engine. So it's like people are sort of starting to experiment what it might be like to do like a point and click action adventure where the characters that you're talking to are Rasa bots. There's definitely some escape room kind of things that might be interesting as you can do there as well.
Right, that's it for the questions, I guess, so far.
Okay. How much time do we have? Because we started at, I think we have like 15 minutes left, right?
Yeah, I think. Yeah. I mean, there's not a time foundation. As long as you're having fun, and I'm pretty sure that we're having a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, definitely. But what I'll then do is I'll just wait for a couple more questions to come in. But I think it might then be cool for me to just give like a really quick demo of Rasa X. That might like the labeling that you kind of see what that's like. I do have to spin up a small VM then on Google, but that should take 5 minutes.
Yeah, sure.
Mm-hmm. There seems to be a lot of interest in the data engineering aspect of it and
how
the labeling would happen.
Then we're going to spend 15 minutes doing Rasa X. That's fine.
So I think like I have questions for you. They're
Sure.
just coming up on the YouTube chat.
Mm-hmm.
So the question is, if I have to add a custom intent, just push the custom intent action, upgrading of actions / intent, since that .yml file is a static, and I guess these are stateless pods.
So it's not entirely stateless, we should say. So we do keep track of, let's say, the last couple of things that happened in the conversation. And we kind of have to, right? I mean, suppose, again, the pizza example. Suppose that you're ordering a pizza and then halfway through the order you ask, are you a bot? Then the chatbot should immediately after go back to the order. There's still a little bit of state there. But what we typically do is we have this idea of a state store. So you can have Redis or you can have a database where we sort of save that. And that's also useful for things like, hey, what's your address? And some of these entities have to be long-lived. We call them slots, and we want these slots to be filled in and kept for a longer while. But these are all engineering settings that you can push and tweak. But we do keep track of a little bit more than just your previous action. So in that sense, it's not stateless.
Yeah, all right. And I think the other question is somewhat similar to this. The question is, can we add intents on the fly based on user questions?
Actually, that might be something that's cool to demonstrate. I'm just gonna click start on the VM real quick. There we go. So that thing's running. So there's another command from the command line that you can also use locally to train interactively. That's actually worth to show. So what I can do now is I can type Rasa interactive. And it has to boot up. But the idea is, this is like the Rasa shell in many ways, but as we're typing, we're able to correct the bot. And as we're correcting, it's going to add training data to the files. So it's not really in real time updating the machine learning algorithms. It's not like that, but we are changing the files in the config, so to say. So what I can do now is I can type yo, for example. And it says here that the NLU model classified yo with the intent to deny and there are no entities. And this is not correct. So I can type no, that's not correct. And yo in this case would be greet. And then are there any entities? Well, there's no entities here. So then it's saying, okay, I should listen now and I've made this correction. The bot wants to run utter greet. Is that correct? I can say yes. The bot wants to listen. I can say yes. And I can now say, ever heard of Rasa and Pikachu? And now it's saying, hey, is the intent confirm exists correct for ever heard of Rasa? And now it's saying, hey, that's a Pokemon name. Is that correct or not? And it's also asking the same thing for Pikachu. So I would say here, yes, the entities and all that stuff is labeled correctly. And now the bot wants to run action check existence, and that's also correct. And then it wants to run action listen. Okay, and now I can sort of say, well, let's stop. So I hit Control C. And what I can do now is I can say, well, I want to export and quit. So I'll just say that, and then it will export stories to if the file exists. And then it's going to change the NLU file and domain file. Okay, so everything has stopped now. But if I were to go to the stories.md file, for example, then we do see that this interactive story has just appeared. So it's not the same experience as Rasa X, like we have way more features there. But if you want to just interact with your chatbot locally, this can be a somewhat convenient way to experience what it's like talking to something that makes a mistake. And it can be a nice way to add some data that will improve your bot, hopefully.
Definitely. And I think even if you want to add the human in the loop or the domain expert sort of thing, this is like a fantastic way to do that.
Yeah, definitely. The only downside of this is still from the command line. And the typical business user that I'm aware of usually is frightened by like a black screen with just a bunch of text on it. So Rasa X is almost booted up. So I just need to find the password. Then I can show you what it looks like. There we go. That should be the password. Yep, there we go. Okay, so this is the browser. Yeah, there's all sorts of messages, and I can deal with that. So again, this is definitely like a preview screen, but this is a demo that I've been running. This, what you're looking at right now, is Rasa X. So this is the user interface of it. And I'll just try to zoom in a little bit. And what you can see here is conversations that actual users have had with my Pokemon chatbot. So a user here says hello. And then here I'm saying, hi, I'm a Pokebot. I'm a bot that will help you catch them all. Right now, I am only talking a little bit about Pokemon names. My features are still being built. Is there anything you would like me to add me? Is there anything you would like to add to me in the future? And someone says Pokemon battles. This is a conversation that once happened. And what I can do is I can add a little flag such that someone else will also have a look at it. And I can sort of scroll around here and have a view of what some people are doing. But what I can also do is I can sort of say, hey, here's an end-to-end story, and I can copy this to interactive learning. And there's some labeling stuff that I could do here. Something that's also kind of interesting is like here's a sentence that someone wrote. So someone once wrote ciao, and it's then said, hey, that's greeting. That's wrong, because ciao in this case is saying goodbye. And then I can say, hey, this is now correct. And then these are all sorts of different examples that I can relabel. And what I can then eventually do is from here, click this big train button, and then it's going to retrain the model from here. Now, the idea is there is this link to GitHub as well. So that means that, I can push to GitHub and pull to GitHub as well. So if people are making improvements to Git, I can pull it in, train from here, etc. But the coolest feature, like genuinely what I think is the coolest feature, is there is this share with guest testers button. And I can give a name. So I can call this demo, and it's a demo. And I can then generate a link, which I can copy. I'll copy that to this browser over here. And then I've been invited to the conversation demo. And what I can then do is I can type hello here. And then, oh, yeah, I'm using an experimental browser. Hang on, zoom in. But then I'm now talking to this chatbot. And I think I'm able to type something ridiculous like, I want to know Team Rocket's theme song and lyrics. I don't know, like something, I guess that's from the show, like something I can do. And then it says, hey, I'll keep that in mind. Something else you would like me to be able to do. Make me banana cookies. I don't know. This is not a particularly intelligent conversation, but it says registered, anything else. But the nice thing is, like, an actual user is able to talk to a chatbot via the browser. So this is something that domain people are going to like. And there's like a reset button here. This is meant as a place where proper domain experts can like give a lot of feedback. But if the demo of this went well, I think I should now be able to look at this. Yeah, so this conversation just came in. So I can say, hello, I'm a Pokebot. And then apparently one of my users says that they want to know the Team Rocket's theme song and something about banana cookies. That's something that came in here. And I can start labeling from here. And if this circular interaction is this is the place you want to get. And definitely in the beginning, you're going to have to come up with your own conversations. It's super normal. You got to start somewhere. But the dream is to get this to users as quickly as possible, because I stand by this. It's the attitude of Rasa as well. The moment that you start iterating this way, that's when the chatbot is going to get more and more intelligent, because you're also testing things like conversational design and what are people actually interested in and that sort of thing. And the machine learning is an important part of that, but that's something that Rasa will at least in part solve for you. It's this interaction that's going to be a little bit more interesting in general. So yes, CI/CD. This thing can run on Kubernetes. It can run on a VM. It can run into with. I think I'm running this on top of Docker. What's the thing? Docker Compose. I'm running this on, I think. But this will help you with CI. But the main reason why I'm interested in it is because of this. Hey, we can keep the training data going in the loop, and we have a couple of designers who are going to push some cool features to this real soon too.
But for this, sorry, go ahead.
Well, and if people want to talk gibberish to my chatbot, I can also share the link if people are interested. I guess we can do that. I guess I can keep that up. Hang on, let me just get the link. All right, I have to get this whole thing. If I share this in Slack and then you guys put it into YouTube?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so Sunket should have seen it now, at least. It's an HTTP link. It's not necessarily the most secure link, but people can have a brief conversation and get a real quick demo of the Rasa chatbot. I should say it's not the best chatbot I've made that's online there at the moment, but it's the user interface will be demonstratable that way. And then,
yeah, I got the link. I'll just share it across.
Cool. There was a question.
Yeah, is the model deployed on your laptop or online somewhere on a server, and then the link is made public?
Yes. So the model so this is not running locally. There's an IP address that you can see, and on that VM, I believe it's inside of a Docker container, to be honest. That's where the model zip file is, and when I click retrain, there's going to be a new file. You can train something locally and then upload it, but everything that you're seeing now is running just live.
Right, makes sense.
And we're also thinking about some A/B testing features that we want to add to this system. That's definitely stuff that we're thinking about. But the main thing that we think is going to make a big difference here is get this live-ish as soon as possible, so you can get your first users to start interacting with it. And it's really because I want to keep coding in my little terminal and run things on my own local machine. But the moment you can get this to users as soon as possible, that's when you're going to get the biggest improvement. Typically, you don't want to delay that.
The model can only be as good as the data is.
Yeah, and I will say chatbots are interesting in that sense. So it's really the Venn diagram. I have no idea what sort of gibberish people are going to throw at my chatbot. So it's really hard for me to predict what I have to guard against exactly. Now, what I think does help in this case, if we think back of the Hugging Face example, it's nice that Rasa does have this constraint of a story that your chatbot has to stick to. I think that there's some merit in that, because typically your chatbot has to serve a couple of sort of quite narrow use cases, and it's nice to know that your chatbot's not really going to step away too far away from it. The typical use cases that we see are also like customer service. That's an obvious use case. But one thing that is interesting to mention is there are people now playing with Alexa and stuff. So people are using Alexa for like the natural language to text, etc. But one of our contributors now made a chatbot on Alexa to teach his son maths. So the son talks to Alexa, and then the chatbot generates algebra questions, which the son then has to answer. I also argue I think that's pretty cool too. So people are empowered is kind of a big word. I do like the idea that this is like one of those nice little Lego bricks that's going to make it just a little bit easier for people to make different kinds of apps and tools and make new things, and that's very interesting.
So there was one more question regarding the architecture. Prakhar was wondering if not the model architecture, we all know that was tired, but if the architecture of the whole product, Rasa as a whole, can be found somewhere.
Yeah, so definitely we have some documentation on that. In terms of, I'm assuming it's a little bit more about deployment and that idea.
Yeah.
A lot like we assume it's a little. Well, assume we are flexible. If you want to run this on VMs, we'll find a way. But in general, we run all of this stuff in containers. That way, you have your NLU server, you have your action server, and those things are sort of nicely separated. And then any state that you might want to keep track of, that's another place with a database. So we have this Kubernetes setup if that is something that you like. We also offer a one-click VM install. Well, not really one-click, but like copy, paste, enter in a terminal. So one click for developers. And we have the Docker Compose. And that serves most people, I would say. But the Rasa X also has sort of enterprise thing attached to it. So we have support engineers who help you set that up, and that's sort of a service that you can buy from us. It's we make our money with support and the enterprise contract, so to say, and that keeps everything else nice and open source.
Fair enough. One more is that GameSpoiler is asking, can we do conversation markings through the CLI, or is that only in Rasa X?
What do you mean with markings?
I'm not sure either.
So we have the, as I showed before, there's a person asking about Mew. Legendary Pokemon. All right, back to the terminal. So we saw this Rasa interactive command here, right? So I guess from the command line, if you want to label and play, this would be the way to do it. You could theoretically also run Rasa X locally. That's something you could potentially do. So yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, probably. There was a suggestion for the Mew joke that what is more than one Mew? You could have Mew too. So along the same lines.
Let me check. Do I have that joke already? I don't. I would love a PR for that. No. So I have. What's better than one Pikachu? A Pikachu. Okay, it's a similar joke, but I'll allow the Mew joke. You definitely feel free to make a PR for that.
I suppose that's it for the questions so far.
Okay. Okay, well then, I think timing-wise, we reached a nice little 2 hours there. So, just to check, like, I hope people liked this workshop. It's a very brief introduction to Rasa. There's definitely more features. Check out the documentation. My name is Vincent. Ask me anything on Twitter. People can definitely reach out to me. And if people have questions about some of the other projects that I'm engaged with, like the Lego thing, I'm also all open for questions if people are interested in that. But I hope people have liked it, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you very much for coming to the workshop, and it was a treat. And I mean, everybody loves this, and I hope you'll be getting a lot of messages on Twitter and LinkedIn for the workshops, and I'm hoping a lot of PRs too.
Yeah, so I've been ignoring Twitter, but I now see this eye patch where I seem to be getting lots of retweets. So that's good. But yeah, like any questions on Rasa, like ping me. I'll gladly answer, and feel free to play with the Pokédex demo. I acknowledge it's not the most enterprise ready app as is, but hopefully it is able to give you like a good starting point where the custom server custom actions just work, and etc.
Yeah, the Indian audience is quite curious, and I'm hoping you'll be getting a lot of notifications at Rasa X Twitter, or wherever you are.
Well, we'll see. If there's a nice little spike in traffic, that'll be cool to see. But one thing I suppose it is valid to mention, there are also Rasa meetups, and I do know that in particular there's a lot of activity in India. Like I keep forgetting the city names, but I do know that we have like 3 pretty big meetups as well.
Yeah, it's Mumbai, it's Pune, Mumbai, Delhi, and Bangalore. These are the most active ones in India.
Yeah, no, but those are PyData ones, right? There's also like separate ones for just Rasa.
Yeah, Rasa Bangalore is pretty big.
Oh, okay. So we were talking. Okay, just want to make sure we weren't confusing. But so Hyderabad, Hyderabad.
Hyderabad is another one. Yep.
Did I pronounce it correctly?
Very close.
Okay. I'll take that. No, but we do see like a pretty big spike from India whenever we get traffic in general. So we do know that a lot of people in India are playing with it. One thing that is maybe valid to mention, actually, because that's something that people have been asking about, and that's actually something that would help our community a lot. I have shown you the NLU data repository on Rasa. It's the one with the intent examples, etc. These are all English examples. We wouldn't mind pointing to other people's repos if they have support for other languages. I would understand perfectly if English is a use case in India, but that you also need support for other languages. And we would love to have a small community of these data sets in different languages as well. So if people are interested in maintaining something like that, reach out to me, because we would love to link to you.
Yeah, that would be great. So the people who are watching now, please note this, and ping Vincent about this.
Certainly, and given the diversity and the number of languages in India, there's a lot more scope to be added here.
Yeah, and I could be like, but there are proper. It's not just dialects, but I believe there's like multiple languages as well, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, no, that's the impression I had. I mean, we have the same thing in the Netherlands, but it's just a bit smaller, as you could imagine. But yeah, there's no more questions coming in, or?
There's just one last one. Pranav's asking, what would be the best way to reach you? Will it be Twitter or someone else?
Twitter, LinkedIn. You can find me on most social media except Instagram. My girlfriend gets that. I don't. It's beyond me. But my Twitter handle is fishnets88. But if you type in Vincent Warmerdam in LinkedIn, I think there's like 2 other Dutch guys with that name. But I'm the guy with the avatar of the person in the ball pit. And add me. Tell me you went to the workshop. I'll add you, and you can ask me anything on whatever social media you like.
Yeah, but if you type Vincent on Twitter, it only shows your name and your cool profile picture.
Really?
I don't think. Yeah, exactly. I don't think the other guys show up.
Well, I mean, so if I type my name in my Twitter, obviously I see my name first, but it might be, because I'm me. But yeah, fishnets88. If you Google Vincent PyData, you'll get a YouTube video. Probably that's me. That can also lead you to me.
Yeah, the videos are super great, and exactly, I've been watching your last year's PyData London's video, and it was a pretty good video.
The artificial stupidity one, that one.
Yep, exactly.
That got a lot of positive feedback. Thanks.
Even the
So,
more recent, the whiteboard ones explaining embeddings and how those process, really fascinating stuff.
Thanks. No, I've gotten a lot of nice feedback from that. I'm super happy it helps people understand. There's one thing that's interesting about those videos, actually. When I made those videos, I thought, this is going to make it maybe easier for some people to get started with word embeddings, because I was making this for developers. But now it seems that people are using the videos in a different way. They're using those videos to make screenshots to then present those to upper management. So it's not just that they're learning it, they're actually using that material to also teach non-developers about this material, which is also great. Because I can imagine if you're a company and you're investing in this chatbot stuff, you got this guy talking about word embeddings, and okay, I'm sure it's nice, but it sounds like rocket science. So I'm happy to hear it's helping some people. But if there's any algorithms that you would say, hey, I would love to get more on that, just reach out to me. I think the next, so I've just done the transformer architecture. The next thing that I'll be doing is star space. That'll go out on Monday. The TED policies are going out the week after, and then some live coding. And there's going to be one video on the unsung hero that is the count vectorizer. That just has to happen.
Right, perfect. Just one last question from Games Spoiler. He was wondering if the conversation logs that you get from Rasa X, can those be somehow used to start labeling stuff through the interactive Rasa client?
As in the thing from the terminal?
Yeah.
Ooh. Well, so I'll grab Rasa X, because the quick question, I think you can, but the question is if you want to. So there is this Git link here, right? So technically, if I click this button, then, and let's say I've been labeling and there's some changes, I can click that button, and then Rasa X will update the Git server, or the Git instance, the thing on GitHub. And that means that I will have those new instances there. And that means that I can then do git pull on my local machine and then do everything from there. The goal, though, is that Rasa X is going to be a bit more convenient for labeling than doing Rasa Interactive from the terminal, because there's going to be more widgets, etc. So I would argue that maybe it's not necessary to perform. That's the only thing I would like to add there. But you can do it that way if you're so inclined.
Fair enough. All right, that's it, I guess, for the questions at least. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah,
my pleasure.
And it was super awesome to have you. And there's like one more thing, like I would like the audience to do it. So I think there should be a link for the feedback form on your screen right now.
Should I stop sharing my screen?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I think you can see the feedback link on the bottom of your screen. I mean, it'll just take you like 1 or 2 minutes to fill it up. So please fill it up. And a few announcements for the meetup. Like this is the day 1 for the 39th meetup, and we're gonna have day 2 that will be tomorrow, and we're gonna go live on 8 p.m. tomorrow. So today we went live on 9 p.m., but tomorrow it's gonna be 8 p.m. And Nick is gonna deliver a talk on adversarial examples and whatnot. So
Why even bother?
Yeah, why even bother? Sorry. And it's gonna be great. Nick has worked at Google Paint for past 3 years, and he's a lead vocalist in a band, Good Kid Band, which is currently I'm addicted to. You should definitely go and listen to Witches. And I think that will be it for this meetup. Thank you so much for joining, everyone, and thank you, Vincent, very much for coming to the meetup. And it was a pleasure to have you.
Likewise.
So I think we should stop the live streaming now. But yeah, we can stay on the call. And Vincent,
like this is gonna be. I'm interested in how this went on your end as well. But we stopped the